Hello there, everybody. Normally, big band is the easiest EPs to find out there at the thrift stores and second-hand stores. But the latest years, or should I say the latest decade, I have managed to find more and more bebop and even hardbop on EP also for a very reasonable price. So it has grown to a very huge stack of bebop and hardbop EPs that I have right now. And in part 2 in my series where I show my jazz EPs is going to be time to take a look at these bebop and hardbop EPs. So prepare yourself for a great deal of Stan Getz, but also maybe some surprises, I guess. Some Art Blakey on EP. And some might wonder how many parts I will do this time, considering that the jazz albums took 5 parts. But in this case, I may only need 3 parts. So I think it will only be one more part after this. So let's go to the record room and check out some jazz EPs. So now we're coming to modern jazz, bebop, some hardbop. I think I have a couple of Jimmy Smiths here also. But we're starting with a Julian Cannonball Adderley. This doesn't say here, but the blues from Bohemia, I'm glad there's you, Dog, My Cats, and Junior's tune. Benny Bailey Quintet. Benny Bailey worked in Sweden with Quincy Jones when he was here, which also is the reason why this is only Swedish musician. In other words, something that might be in Swedish section actually, since it also is recorded in Sweden. So I put this in, sorted in the Swedish section. Now we're coming to Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. We have 3 singles that all contains the same song, but with different B-sides, which is the reason why I have all these 3. We have Moanin' with Justice. We have Blues March with Moanin'. And we have one with Moanin' Part 1 and Part 2. Not often I see a blue note at a single actually. We have Clifford Brown and Art Farmer, Stockholm, Swedening, and cause these bloops. Gigi Grice and Clifford Brown Orchestra. Bob Brookmeyer and Quartet. Studdy and Brown, Clifford Brown and Max Roach. Coming to Dave Brubeck. Wonderful Copenhagen. Dave Brubeck Quartet. Same song, different B-side. Charlie Christian, Jazz Immortal at Minton's. Swing to Bop. Which might be a little bit of a hint what Charlie Christian would have done if he would have survived the TBC. He would have been doing a lot of bebop in my guessing. Natural 7, Al Coon, Joe Newman, and so on, Milt Hinton. Earthy, Kenny Burrell, Al Coon, Art Farmer, and so on. Al Coon and Bob Brookmeyer Quartet. We have another one of these classics in jazz. This is Miles Davis. These are coming to some section of Miles Davis singles here. This is actually a song from Birth of the Cool album. And only for that it is a reason to have this one. Miles Davis and Jill Evans, and an EP from Porgy and Bess. Miles Davis Collector's Items. Containing, as it doesn't say, compulsion and in your own sweet way. More Miles. The Musing of Miles. The Musings of Miles. Cooking with the Miles Davis Quintet on EP. And here we have, I think, the only John Coltrane presence in this EP section. This is an EP that I found just recently. I was just pure curiosity, because there are not that much famous band leaders here. Jazz Studio Part 2 with Herb Galler and Milt Bernhardt, Don Fagerquist, so some pretty much known, but no giant names here. But it's really good jazz anyway. Stan Getz. Now we're coming to a huge section of Stan Getz singles. And there are even more of those in the Swedish part. This one doesn't have the correct sleeve, unfortunately, but I'm doing the best I can, I guess. This is from with Charlie Bird playing the Brazilian music. Stan Getz and J.J. Johnson at the Opera House. The Sound, Stan Getz Quartet. Interpretations by the Stan Getz Quintet. I have another one of these, a green release with these songs, and a yellow release with these songs. Stan Getz Storyville. Jazz Samba, Stan Getz with Charlie Bird. GETZ meets Mulligan in high fee. Stan Getz and Horace Silver. Is there any doubt that I do like Stan Getz music? The artistry of Stan Getz. And we have another artistry of Stan Getz. Now, leaving Stan Getz. J and K, 1954. J.J. Johnson and Kay Winding, that is. Three trumpets, Art Farmer, Donald Byrd and Idris Suleiman. Dizzy Gillespie, and here we come more Stan Getz. But Dizzy is the first name here, so I put him under Dizzy Gillespie. Exactly like you, and I let the song get out of my heart. Dizzier and Dizzier. Bought in Stockholm, actually. The Dizzy Gillespie Orchestra at Record Hunter. Dizzy Gillespie. Bill Harris and his orchestra. We have the Jackson Harris Herd. Jackson is Chubby Jackson then, and Harris is the recently named Bill Harris. Some of these is actually pretty hard to do in alphabetic order, because you never know, or at least doing some genre, and so you want to put every musician together, the entire catalog you have with them. And then he has played with others that have their names in first. Then you have to shatter the entire collection with, for instance, Stan Getz, that are both having his own bands and play with Dizzy Gillespie. Chubby Jackson's All Stars with Gerry Mulligan, Sue Sims, Georgie Old. Milt Jackson. Without more than just quartet, with arrangements by Quincy Jones. Plenty Soul, Volume 1. Milt Jackson 5. And we actually have 3 of 4 original more than jazz quartet members here, with Percy Heath and Kenny Clark also present. We have very much mishmash of different musicians, actually. Cecil Payne in his orchestra, Bill Henderson, Wynton Kelly and J.J. Johnson. Still a great EP though. More J and K. And this time just J, the J.J. Johnson Quintet. We have the Jackie McLean Quintet, which I actually didn't know one thing about when I bought it. So this was more or less a blind buy, but I felt like, why not? It sounds jazz, and it was jazz. I think it was titled by Donald Byrd, who actually is present on this album. on this EP, and that made me realize this might be actually good. Modern Jazz Quartet, the entire band at Music Inn. Pyramid. The Modern Jazz Quartet Jazz Club Series. Modern Jazz Quartet, another one. And do you recognize this one? It's actually the single from the album of this one, the original this one. It was originally released as a soundtrack for the movie No Sun in Venice, but here is a reissue with this name instead. But when it comes to original release, I at least have the single. Modern Jazz Quartet, a lot of MGQ here. Both MGQ in the later version with Connie Kay and the original one with Kenny Clark. Modern Jazz Quartet. The final Modern Jazz Quartet EP actually. Now we're coming to another huge section, Gerry Mulligan. The California Concerts, Volume 2. We have this bought in Uppsala a couple of years ago. And this also bought in Uppsala. And I do have the album, the entire full-length album with this one also. Jazz Gallery, Gerry Mulligan, Phillips. The new Gerry Mulligan Quartet, featuring Art Farmer. Gerry Mulligan Quartet, also bought in Uppsala. This one contains, this is recordings, I guess from this, pretty much the same as this one. It's also from Paris, but this is from 1954 in Paris, and it is Love Me or Leave Me and Laura. I'm gonna go fishing. Gerry Mulligan and the Concert Jazz Band. Not yet though, because here comes a real great classic. I talked about this before, one of the best soundtracks that I own from the movie I Wanna Live, starring Susan Hayward. Susan Howard was the one in Dallas, Susan Hayward in this one. Real great soundtrack by Johnny Mandel, but to that soundtrack was also this EP with Gerry Mulligan. Gerry Mulligan again. Some musicians you do tend to find more with than others. It's pretty clear here. Gerry Mulligan and Thelonious Monk. Here we have part 3 and part 4 of a series called Presenting the Gerry Mulligan Sextet. Coming to Charlie Parker with a concert hall, but a jazz tone. Another one of these concert hall sub-labels. But this actually is containing 6 tracks. Actually, not often you find that much on an EP, so why not buy a concert hall for 6 tracks? Charlie Parker with strings, one of his favorite projects that didn't go all that well, which broke him down eventually. We have another Norman Granz release with Charlie Parker. Coming to Art Pepper. Art Pepper returns. We have some Ralph Burns among the Jazz at the Philharmonic. And Jazz at the Philharmonic here is a whole lot of names here. Oscar Peterson is here. We have Al Kuhn, we have Danny Bank, Sam Marowitz, but it's always interesting to find Jazz at the Philharmonic stuff. Sonny Stitt. Hard Swing, Sonny Stitt Quartet. Sonny Stitt plays the arrangement of Quincy Jones. We have Sonny Rollins plays 4 plus 4. Zoot Sims. Interesting, because here this is actually a trick recording where he plays all these at the same time. So he plays with himself in the band, which is pretty amazing considering that this is a 50s recording. Zoot Sims, more Zoot Sims. With French musicians. Jimmy Smith, one of only 2 Jimmy Smith stuff that I have on EP or single. This is Oliver Nelson stuff from Verb, found on the Sundsvall Record Fair. This one isn't actually the best sleeve, but I couldn't resist it. The winners of the Downbeats Reader Poll 1960, which contains Gerry Mulligan. We have Cannonball Adderley. I was wrong. I thought that Miles Davis was the only John Coltrane related stuff that I had, but he is actually here, so pardon me. One side each for Gerry Mulligan and Cannonball Adderley. Dave Pell Octet. Not all that big name, but still great music. and Ghost Dancing may want you to believe that it's actually some kind of it's big band's single that I placed wrong, but it actually isn't big band, even though it might give you that thinking. Lenny Tristano, my favorite. Then I can definitely accept that this is a classic in jazz release, and it's pretty natural. Tristano and Lee Kun's releases, Cross Current, Intuition, Sex of Kind, Digression, and so on. But Lenny Tristano on an EP, always great to have. Charlie Ventura with a horrible sleeve, but still, I bought it for I think 10 cents or something like that. An Evening with Charlie Ventura and Mary Ann McCall. A couple of Sarah Vaughan, Lullaby of Birdland with Clifford Brown. Paul Quintet, Quinchette, his name. Sarah Vaughan again, and Clifford Brown. Here we have some of these. Here we have some of these that share one side each. So it isn't one musician that actually is focused on, which is why I placed them last actually. 2x4, Kay Winning on one side, and Dizzy Gillespie and is cool and the cool jazz stars at the B side. So the next time we take a look at various swing, piano jazz, and Swedish jazz EPs. Take care and so long.